There was an exceptionally old tree on my family's farm, an apple tree, all but dead when it was felled in '82. The day my grandfather took it down, it was mostly rotted, with only the faintest trace of life left in a single branch. As he finished the job, his uncle came over from next door. "Ah, so you cut down the Johnny Appleseed tree," he said. Until that moment, my grandpa hadn't even known what he'd taken his saw to. Boy, what I wouldn't give to see the orchard that was once there, or the land itself before my family settled there in 1849. Even just a glimpse of that old tree, or perhaps a cutting from which to give it new life. As it is, though, just the story remains. That and the only piece my grandpa could salvage, much of which is still touched by rot and riddled with holes. Just a bit left that's solid wood. He offered me a piece several years ago, which I gladly accepted. I've used it for a couple of special projects, saving each scrap as though they were gold. And finally, I know why. To make the ink for my hand-poked body art, and carry with me a little of the magic and legend still left in the world. To do so, I have turned the scrap bits into charcoal and ground them to a fine powder. I've now switched from using isopropyl alcohol to vodka because vodka doesn't evaporate as quickly, but will work just as well to sterilize and carry the ink. You can see a tattoo from my previous video there on my knee. I went back and filled it in a bit better since my first attempt, doing the same with my shoulder as well. The wrist piece that I'm working on today is an abstract graphic depiction of the sun, and each of its rays of light represent one of my siblings. I'll be using Osage orange thorns again for my needles. These come from trees that I've grown myself, from seed to sapling. When pruning them in the spring, I cut sections a few inches long from the branches I'd removed. Then I left a thorn attached to one end of those sections. Puncturing skin to a proper depth takes some trial and error for sure, especially when you start with little to no instruction. The same goes for even breaking the skin in some places. Skin thickness and toughness varies a lot throughout the body. The two biggest contributors to achieving success are proper stretching of the skin and a straight, sharp needle. Thorns, being naturally occurring, are not always optimal in either of those categories, and I've found it's best if you use them in their natural state rather than trying to reshape them. Between these two, the bottom thorn is clearly the better option. If the skin is particularly tough or difficult to stretch well, the top one here is better yet. The more holes you poke, the more apparent these little details become. Like I mentioned earlier, vodka evaporates less quickly than isopropyl alcohol, but it still needs replenished every once in a while, especially if you're working in a breeze like I am today. After completing about half of my wrist, I took a break for the evening and resumed the following morning, by which time the swelling was pretty severe, as you can see. For me, this wasn't a big concern. It's simply due to the level of trauma this type of tattooing does to the skin. Also, I overworked the skin a bit because I hadn't yet discovered a proper stretching method for this location. As seen here, I had mostly abandoned stretching and was simply muscling the needle in at this point. This is not the best option. I definitely don't recommend it. I did, however, figure out a good skin stretching solution after this session, but the swelling was severe enough by the end of it, I chose to wait and finish this tattoo at a future time. So I simply dotted in underneath my wrist where I was having the most trouble puncturing the skin, and waited until I had time to resume working on it. Generally, I'd say not to rework the same lines or previous work until it's had a minimum of 3 weeks, but probably closer to 4 to 5 to heal. So when I had a free morning 2 weeks later, I worked in the line above the rays, rather than finishing the rays themselves. And you can see right off the bat, I'm practicing an awkward but effective skin stretching method. Using both knees or legs helps accomplish a 2-point stretch, and the hand working the needle can be used to get your third point. However, the third point can also be achieved by pressing the skin down on the palm of the hand and rocking the wrist back, as you can see I'm doing here. It's not the best scenario, but when working on yourself with primitive methods, it makes things a heck of a lot easier. Here, I'm replacing my drawn-on line with a tattooed dot every so often. That way, I don't have to remark my line each time it rubs away. On the back of my arm, I rock the wrist downward to continue achieving the 3-point stretch. And when necessary, I can also press the skin away with the hand that's working the needle. The better refined and mixed ink and greater understanding of the tattooing process definitely improved my results. The ink on the sun rays is holding after 2 weeks of healing, and there are far less gaps to fill than my first tattoos. I'm hoping this last session's work will be even more consistent, having also learned to properly stretch the skin at this point. So I'll be filling in the blanks and working in touch-ups as these heal, as well as adding more to my arm. I'm putting together designs for an entire sleeve in a way that links it all together and is personally meaningful for me. And I'll be continuing this series as long as I'm alive or have the ability to upload videos, so if you're interested in seeing my progress as I continue learning this art form, please give me a like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, everyone. See you again soon.